Hello, this is Max. Today you will hear the story of how a psycho kidnapped cheerleader girls and abused them and what they had to go through. You can subscribe to the channel after watching. It helps us a lot in realizing the content. Chelsea receives a video call from her closest friend, Mia, who has been exchanging explicit photos with a boy named Dylan. Chelsea is concerned that Dylan might share the photos with others, so Mia suggests sending them to herself as a precaution. However, Chelsea wants no part in it and insists on going to school. Downstairs, Chelsea finds her mother already decorating for Halloween, while her sister, Christina, is on a phone call. Chelsea asks her mother for a ride to school because she doesn't want to be associated with her sister and her snobby friends. However, her mother refuses and advises Chelsea to get along with her sister. Christina ends her call and teases Chelsea when she sees her texting someone named Virgo Boy. Chelsea refuses to discuss it and urges her sister to leave. At school, Chelsea continues to receive texts from Virgo Boy, but she ignores them. She sees Mia talking to Dylan and Seth, and Mia reveals that Dylan has invited them to his house that night. Despite Chelsea's hesitation, Mia asks her to keep Seth occupied while she spends time with Dylan. Reluctantly, Chelsea accompanies Mia that evening. Mia leaves her alone with Seth in the living room, and he makes a sudden advance by kissing her and attempting to touch her inappropriately. Chelsea quickly pulls away. The next day at school, Chelsea tells Mia that she had to leave because of Seth's advances. Suddenly, Dylan shows up and starts making out with Mia, leaving Chelsea with no choice but to reply to Virgo Boy. Virgo Boy introduces himself as Brad and begins flirting with Chelsea. However, a security guard confiscates her phone. After school, Chelsea's mother picks her up and scolds her for getting into trouble once again. As a punishment, her mother takes away her phone for a month. Without her phone, Chelsea tries to keep herself entertained at home. Fortunately, Mia visits her and gives her a spare phone. However, Chelsea discovers that Mia only did this because she used her as an alibi to see Dylan. Angry and hurt, Chelsea accuses Mia of caring only about Dylan, and Mia leaves. Chelsea logs into her account and continues her conversation with Brad. She vents about her difficult life, and Brad offers to listen and get to know each other better. He mentions Chelsea's profile where she claimed to be a cheerleader. To maintain her false image, Chelsea enters Christina's room and takes pictures in her cheerleading uniform. She sends the photos to Brad, leading to a video call. However, Brad's face appears blurry because his phone camera is broken. Over the next 3 weeks, Chelsea develops a deeper connection with Brad and suggests meeting in person. Brad agrees, but during a video call, Chelsea hears a girl's voice in the background, and Brad seems irritated. When she asks about it, Brad explains that it's his sister, Sadie. Despite the situation, Chelsea and Brad continue with their plans. Brad suggests they meet at a warehouse Halloween party, with Chelsea dressing up as a zombie cheerleader and him as a zombie quarterback. Excited, Chelsea agrees. On Halloween, Chelsea tells her mother that she will stay home and give out candy to trick-or-treaters. However, once everyone leaves, she goes to the venue and meets Brad, who has his face covered in makeup and wears a football helmet. He gives her alcohol and insists they finish the whole bottle before leaving to avoid getting caught. Reluctantly, Chelsea drinks the entire bottle and starts feeling intoxicated. In her drunken state, Brad leads Chelsea to his car, where he ties her up and covers her in the back seat. Before driving off, he destroys Chelsea's phone. Chelsea wakes up later, chained in a creepy basement. Brad arrives with food and unties her hands. The next day, he enters the basement again, but mistakenly addresses Chelsea as Sadie. When she corrects him, he slaps her and insists that she is now Sadie. Before leaving, he flips over her plate, causing the food to spill on the ground. Stunned and unable to speak, Chelsea remains quiet until Brad leaves. She finds solace in the presence of a rat that comes to eat the spilled food. When the rat eventually leaves, Chelsea breaks down and cries, realizing that the rat was the only thing that made her feel less alone. Later, Brad taunts Chelsea with water, and she drinks it eagerly, hoping he will also provide her with food. But instead, Brad asks her what her name is before giving her the food. Sarcastically, Chelsea replies that she is Sadie. Brad is displeased with her attitude and drops the food on the ground, but Chelsea still eats it. As Brad leaves, he notices rat droppings and sets up a trap, which captures the rat. Chelsea mourns the creature's death along with her fading hope. Eventually, the lights in the basement are turned on, and another cheerleader appears, introducing herself as Sadie. However, she reveals her real name is Megan. Megan follows Brad's instructions and unlocks Chelsea's chains, but she warns her to behave or face trouble. When Chelsea calms down, Megan orders her to rake the carpet to remove any footprints, emphasizing the importance of everything being perfect and clean. Chelsea complies with Megan's instructions and encounters another cheerleader named Heather, who goes by the name Sadie as well. Heather asks for Chelsea's real name, but Chelsea insists on being called Sadie, which pleases Megan and Heather. Heather leaves to bake a cake for Brad. Megan then orders Chelsea to undress and clean herself up. When Chelsea asks for privacy, Megan becomes angry and forces her into the bathtub. After cleaning her up, Megan informs her that Brad prefers her hair to be bleached. During this time, Chelsea hears crying and discovers an injured girl named Tina in the adjacent room. Chelsea tries to help her, but Tina suddenly accuses her of betrayal. Meanwhile, Brad leaves his office and experiences a sudden headache, triggering memories of the real Sadie who had laughed at him while showing her body. Snapped out of his reverie, Brad goes to the kitchen and finds Heather baking a cake. He approaches her from behind, touches her, and asks if that's what she wants. Heather reluctantly says yes, and he forcefully slams her head onto the table. Shortly after, Heather goes to Chelsea's room with a bruised cheek and helps her prepare for dinner. However, Chelsea panics about Tina needing medical attention. Heather insists that Brad would never take Tina to a hospital, so they must care for her themselves. Chelsea becomes angry, questioning if they have ever tried to escape, but Heather warns her about the consequences they face if they attempt to do so. Instead, Heather assists Chelsea in applying makeup and tells her that they will have outside time. Indeed, Brad allows Chelsea to experience outside time through a VR headpiece that simulates the outside world. Brad eventually ends their session and instructs them to proceed to dinner. Before they do, Heather whispers to Chelsea to save some food for Tina, as leftovers are all she will have to eat. When Chelsea begins eating without Brad, she nearly faces punishment. Overwhelmed, Chelsea admits that she misses her mother. Brad informs her that her father was brought back early by the army to help search for her. He congratulates Chelsea for finally receiving more attention and her sister, Christina. Hearing this, Chelsea sobs, but Brad becomes angry and forces her to compose herself. After dinner, Chelsea discovers Heather packing her belongings. Heather reveals that she has been held captive for 3 years, but now that Brad sees her as perfect, she is free to go. Suddenly, Brad appears to collect Heather, stating that it's time for her final performance. Chelsea feeds Tina and realizes that she is the missing girl she saw on the news. Downstairs, Brad prepares for Heather's final performance but experiences another headache. This triggers memories of when his mother favored his younger sister over him, leading him to wish that she was never born. In response, his mother slapped him and confined him to the basement. Brad snaps back to reality and tells Heather that her final performance will be different. He promises to release her if she completes it. They enter the basement, and Heather warms up while Brad dons a VR headpiece with cameras. When he instructs Heather to start a cheer dance performance, she freezes upon seeing Brad holding a knife. Terrified, Heather attempts to escape, but Brad cuts her arm. Heather argues that Brad believed she was perfect, and he agrees, but that was also why his mother always despised him. Heather screams that she is not his sister, but Brad becomes furious and stabs her in the stomach. Heather continues to fight back, but Brad overpowers her. She tries to escape again, but Brad corners her and repeatedly stabs her, claiming that she always tried to hurt him. Finally, he slits her throat, stating that he will watch her repeatedly. Afterwards, Brad enters Chelsea's room while she is asleep. He hovers his hand over her body but cannot bring himself to touch her. Instead, he rests his head on her chest and cries, which awakens Chelsea. Frozen with fear, Chelsea remains still as Brad hears Sadie's voice in his head and leaves the room. Chelsea covers herself with a blanket, shivering in terror. The next day, Megan communicates with Chelsea through a hole in the wall between their rooms. Chelsea realizes that she has developed Stockholm Syndrome as Megan warns her to stay away from Brad because he belongs to her. Despite abuse from Brad, Megan admits that she still loves him. During breakfast, Chelsea intentionally uses up all the ketchup, angering Brad. He confiscates her food and forbids her from eating. Megan finds this amusing, but Brad becomes annoyed with her and punishes them both by denying them any outside time for the day. Later, Chelsea has a conversation with Tina and learns that Brad impregnated her, which led to her attempt to escape. However, Brad caught her, beat her, and caused her to miscarry. Tina pleads with Chelsea to help her end her life through an overdose, but Chelsea refuses and instead tends to her wounds. Chelsea realizes that Tina's injuries have become infected, leading Tina to lose hope of surviving. In exchange for information on how to escape, Chelsea agrees to help Tina. Chelsea later discovers a picture of the real Sadie in the living room, but Brad quickly takes it away and warns her not to touch it again. She returns to her room, and Tina informs her that Brad is mowing the backyard, providing an opportunity for Chelsea to retrieve the pills from his nightstand. Following Tina's instructions on opening the locked doors, Chelsea successfully retrieves the pills and discovers Heather's necklace in Brad's room. She remembers to rake the carpet to remove any footprints. Chelsea proceeds to Tina's room but makes a detour to Brad's office, hoping to seek help online. However, she cannot access the internet without a password. She quickly leaves, erasing her footprints on the carpet as she goes. Meanwhile, Brad finishes mowing the lawn and enters through the front door. Upstairs, Chelsea accidentally spills the pills but manages to pick them up frantically before reaching Tina's room. Brad hears Chelsea putting the lock back on Tina's door and opens it, causing Chelsea to hide in the shared bathroom. Tina panics upon seeing Brad, and he becomes annoyed, attempting to kill her. Chelsea enters the room and pleads with Brad to stop, but he chokes her instead. Witnessing Tina's distress, Chelsea requests permission to kill her. Surprisingly, Brad agrees, finding it interesting to watch. Chelsea places a pillow over Tina's face, suffocating her to death. Brad is amazed by this and comforts Chelsea, who panics over her actions. Brad, realizing their shared mentality, trusts Chelsea enough to show her his work. He takes her to his office and shows her a video of Heather's death. Although horrified, Chelsea pretends to be thrilled to please Brad. Brad asks Chelsea how he should kill Megan, and she suggests beating her to death. Fascinated by the idea, Brad wants to do it immediately, causing Chelsea to panic. In an attempt to save Megan, Chelsea distracts Brad by seducing him. She tells him that he is perfect, which flatters Brad and makes him fall in love with her. Afterward, he takes Chelsea to his room for intimacy. Once finished, he escorts her back to her room to sleep. Left alone, Chelsea breaks down and cries herself to sleep. The next day, Chelsea attempts suicide with the painkillers but ends up vomiting. During breakfast, Brad continually stares at her, which Megan notices. Brad talks about testing a new VR camera, and Megan volunteers. As Chelsea stands to clean the table, Brad caresses her arm, catching Megan's attention. Megan intentionally bumps into Chelsea in the kitchen, sparking a fight. Brad instructs Chelsea to take Megan to her room. Alone in Megan's room, Chelsea reveals to her that Brad is planning to kill her. She shows Megan Tina's lifeless body and reveals that Brad also killed Heather. However, Megan, still blinded by adoration, rushes downstairs and informs Brad. Angry and realizing he cannot trust any of them, Brad drags them back to their rooms and locks them in. While Brad is away, Chelsea communicates with Megan through the hole in the wall. She proposes that they work together to survive, but Megan remains convinced of Brad's innocence. In the meantime, Brad goes to a basement to test his cameras. During his absence, Chelsea escapes through Tina's room and frees Megan. Together, they head to Brad's office, where Chelsea shows Megan the footage of Heather's death. Megan squirms at the sight, while Chelsea searches the drawers for anything useful. Unbeknownst to Chelsea, Brad is standing by the door. Suddenly, Brad pulls Megan back into her room and ties up Chelsea, dragging her to the basement. Meanwhile, Megan listens to Chelsea's screams and finally decides to help. She breaks down the wall between their rooms and escapes through Tina's room. In the basement, Brad is hurt to discover that everything Chelsea said was a lie. He puts on his camera headpiece, intending to kill her. However, he experiences another headache and recalls his past. Years ago, Brad killed their mother so he could be with Sadie forever. However, Sadie chose to end her own life rather than remain with him. Meanwhile, Megan is in the kitchen, attempting to open a locked drawer containing knives. When she succeeds, she grabs the largest one and sets out to save Chelsea. In the basement, Brad viciously beats Chelsea, just as she suggested the previous night. Chelsea fights back and throws a rock at him. Suddenly, Megan appears and tries to stab Brad, but he easily overpowers her. However, Megan's attack gives Chelsea the opportunity to retaliate. She stabs Brad in the back, causing him to fall to the ground, weakened and injured. The girls seize his keys and make their way to the front door. However, as they attempt to open the door, Brad escapes and grabs Megan, choking her. Chelsea grabs the camera headpiece and strikes Brad's face with it. Finally, the girls manage to open the door and escape to the outside world. They seek help from passers-by and are able to contact their families. Months later, Chelsea attends therapy but refuses to open up to her therapist, avoiding reliving the traumatic events she experienced. Brad resides in an asylum, tormented by haunting images of Sadie. Elsewhere, two 13-year-old girls agree to meet a stranger online, unknowingly continuing the cycle of crimes. So, what do you think of this movie? Write your thoughts in the comments under the video, and also do not forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.